Hi, the claim I will be refuting today is that choosing the sex of a child will negatively affect society. My opponent had three supporting claims. The first one being gender selection will discriminate against other people. The second one being gender choice means you will be playing God. And third one, gender choice interferes with the natural way of conceiving a child. I'll be addressing the two first points. The first one, gender selection will discriminate against other people. This one is divided into two subcategories. The first one being gender selection will cause society to view genders differently. I find this argument to be irrelevant because society has been viewing genders differently for a long time, ever since the beginning of humanity actually. Males have always been seen as the superior gender, and while females have been looked down upon for a while. So no, I don't think choosing this sex of a child will impact society's view on genders. But if it does, I think it will be in a positive way because people will take more pride in who they are because they know that they turned out the way their parents wanted them to be. So that's that. The second subcategory is that says that gender selection is discriminating against poor people because they can't afford it, and I find this argument to be irrelevant as well because if poor people can't afford it, then why worry about it? Gender selection will be more of a privilege than a right, so it's not like anyone's forcing them to do the procedure. The next supporting claim, gender choice means you'll be playing God. My opponent said that by choosing the gender, we start by choosing the gender, and then we start to want to choose the physical features, and we choose whose intelligence the child inherits, and so on and so forth, and it'll be like playing God, but I think it's unfair to jump to that conclusion just yet. There's a parallel case going on right now where the people who are against gay marriage say that if we let gays marry, who's to stop people from marrying dogs and cats and stuff and animals and like that? It's not really fair to jump to that conclusion without knowing, like, for sure what will happen in the future. Also, this playing God thing could be beneficial to couples because choosing the gender of your baby will give the couples more time to prepare. Jennifer Gardena states that the unknown is removed completely from the equation, and expecting parents can prepare for their new bundle of joy, knowing exactly what they are having. No more buying neutral colors or hoping for one sex and getting the other. So parents will be more prepared, and also people think that this procedure is immoral because it puts God out of the equation, but I don't think that's true because God already knows in advance how the child will be before it's even in the womb. If you look in the Bible, in Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 1, God says, I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born. So this means that no matter how much we manipulate our children before they're born, God will already know how he turned out in the end. So in conclusion, I say that choosing the sex of a child will affect society on a very minimal level, and even if it does, it will be in a positive way. Thank you.
Excuse me. All the structural stuff is pretty good. It's easy to follow. You get to the first point where you're talking about it being potentially discriminatory. And I like the position that you take from the beginning that says, look, what world are you living in? This is a world that's already discriminatory. How different is it going to be? How much more different would it be? I think that that's a pretty reasonable presupposition to make. It wouldn't have hurt to present some evidence to support the point, but I think most people recognize that in most cultures, the males have been given preference and are I don't know that people love the girls less, but it's it's a man's world, as they say, and it has been for a long period of time. Now that might be changing, but I think it's pretty clear that the causality of this is not whether or not people could choose the gender for their child. And I think that's the argument that you're making, that the causality is not going to be the same. I thought that the whole argument about poor people was an interesting one. Kind of the way you're presenting this is the argument that says, so poor people would be prohibited from doing something that's bad because they're poor. And that's problematic. Why? A pretty reasonable question to be asking. On the issue of playing God, I thought this was an interesting point because this is really a value argument disguised as a claim of fact that the advocate's presenting here. And you did a pretty good job talking about some of these points. I have no idea what the gay marriage analogy has to do with anything that you're talking about. That was not clear at all. But the argument that talks about, well, they'll be able to prepare, they're going to know what they're going to get, that's kind of an interesting point. I think that you kind of turn the argument upside down when you say, hey, we don't have to worry about it. God's got it covered anyway. So if we're going to be worried about these kinds of issues, we're covered on the morality issue because God's got it square with us. We're okay with him. And I thought that was an interesting approach on that point. I don't know how convincing it is, but in the context of the advocate's argument, I think it could be a little stronger. That was the thing that I think was missing. There's not a lot of analysis of what the advocate's evidence and reasoning was. It's mostly these counterclaims that you're presenting, and I think you could engage a little bit more on those points. I did think that your summary was very clear, though, and that's exactly what you want to do, is leave us with a good, clear impression of the point that you're trying to make. All right.